So welcome to my channel, that's what we call the good life. Now today I'm going to be talking about all the things you can be sowing or planting in the month of July in your home garden or on your allotment plot. Now if you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so, because you'll get lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year from my allotment, my home garden, and from time to time my home kitchen. Now I'm going to obviously be going through what you can sow. I'm also going to be going through some ideas of what to plant. One of the things I'm going to be planting is my leeks, which I've started off from seed, and I'm going to be giving you a really top tip on how to plant these that will really surprise you and will give you awesome leeks for months to come. So I'll be doing that at the end. So to start off with, the things that you can be starting off from seed, there is actually quite a lot. The biggest problem you have this time of year, or I have this time of year, is I haven't actually got that much room left. But if you're lucky enough to have room left, there are still some things that you can start off from seed. Now, runner beans and French beans, I prefer the climbing French beans, but you can get the little bush ones as well. So runner beans and French beans are absolutely fantastic. All our family love runner beans, and the great thing with runner beans is you can freeze them. So although we eat quite a lot of them, they're a really easy thing to freeze. You don't have to blanch them or anything, you can just chop them and store them. So a really good one to be sowing. To be a successional sowing, lettuce would be a really good idea, because I've started some off. My first lot have already started to bolt. I've got another lot that are coming on nicely, which I can start to pick off now, but I know I will need some more. So to successional sow, you know, lettuce leaves and that sort of thing is a really good thing to be doing this time of year. That's something I'll definitely be doing. Mange too, another really great one. Obviously you can grow peas as well, but the great thing with mange too is you're not trying to form peas, you're just trying to form just the little pods, and you can eat them quite small if you want to. And as you can see, I've got some really lovely coloured ones there, some beautiful purple ones. So that's a really lovely thing to start off. And do you know what, there's actually nothing like fresh peas. Absolutely adore them. They are so tasty, taste much better than anything you get in a supermarket, but then again most things do on the allotment. Another thing you can be sowing are spring onions. So I've already started some off, and I've got plenty actually that I've actually just started transplanting at home. But spring onions can be started off because they're obviously great. Now what people don't realise about spring onions, you can pick them small, you can also let them get a little bit bigger and use them as larger onions as well. They never get as big as a big onion, but they do thicken out if you leave them in a little bit longer. Beetroot, really great idea to successional sow beetroot, so you've got a constant supply of beetroot. If I've got room, I'll be popping some beetroot in because that's one of my favourite things. You can make lots of lovely things with beetroot. Pak choy is another lovely thing you can plant, a lovely brassica there. So if you've not started any of that off, that's a really nice thing, lovely in stir fries and that sort of thing, and salads. And love them or hate them, the good old-fashioned turnip, a really simple thing to grow and something you can start off in July from seed. So another one to give you, if you've never tried it, it's worth a try, something different, isn't it? I quite like them roasted or mashed. And bright lights chard or rainbow chard, one of my favourite things, and it goes right through the winter, so really handy thing to have on your allotment if you've not already got it. I've got some chard at home, but there's every chance if I've got room I'll be popping a little bit more in, and it will take me right through the winter into the early spring. So a really good staple, that one. You can use it for lots of different things. More frilly leafed lettuces I've got there, and radishes, another one that really does need to be successional sown because they bolt quite easily. So just to sow a few at a time and keep sowing them, July is another really great time when you can do that. There's also lots of things you can be picking up from garden centres, established plants. You know, I pick up established plants as well. I love starting things off from seed, but I also love wandering around the garden centres and seeing what they've got to offer. Now, although most of my plot is full, you'll probably find quite a lot of brassicas that you could plant out. Courgettes and squashes and peppers and aubergines. You'd want them to be quite, you know, established plants, but if you've got a good garden centre near you, you could be putting those out in the ground. Even if you don't want to start your beans off, you could be buying some plants there as well. So there's really lots and lots of things you can be looking at getting, whether you start off from seed or whether you start off from, you know, get a plant from a garden centre. The only thing I will say to bear in mind is when you're getting a plant from a garden centre, do look at the price and whether it's worth it or not. Personally, I'd never buy plug-it salad leaves. They're so cheap and they're so easy to sow, but sometimes things like established pepper plants and aubergines, I think they're sometimes worth paying for. But again, you've got to weigh up, you know, what you're going to get for the cost it's going to cost you. But, you know, just use your common sense. Sometimes it's just nice to try something new and then maybe start it off from seed or shop around next time for next year. Now let's move on to my top tip on how to sow leeks. So we're now ready to put the leeks out. National dish of Wales. I think it's because it rains so much, they grow really well when it's wet. And just by coincidence, especially for the cameras, guess what? It's raining now, so it's perfect weather to be planting my leeks. So I've obviously dug it over, I've raked it over, I've flattened the ground down a little bit. We've had a heck of a lot of rain here, and I've been wanting to put my leeks in for a little while now, but it's been so incredibly dry, there was just no way they were going to go in the ground. So let's pull them out. So I like to grow mine in a deep pot like that, only because it kind of like, the soil's part way down, it kind of supports the leeks as they're growing up so they don't flop over. My dad always did it, I just copied him. I find it works really well. I have no idea whether that's a top tip or whether other gardeners would recommend it, but doing it in one of these deep like roses ones that a rose has come in just works really well for me. So what you need obviously are your leeks, whether you've started off yourself or whether you've got them from a garden centre, a dibber, ideally with quite a sharp point on it, and a pair of scissors. That's really, really simple. It really couldn't be easier. I know a lot of people, when they plant their leeks, they say that they don't have enough white on them, and that's probably because they've just started them off in the ground and they've not transplanted them and sunk them down. So this is the really important bit. You use your dibber to make a nice deep hole. And even though the rain's been a little bit mad, the really great thing about it being rainy is the soil's not all dropping in because it's not really dry. So you just make your dibber holes. So if I just make a couple, just to give you an idea with the dibber, you know, you'd never be able to plant these any other way. In fact, my holes might end up being a little bit too deep, so I'm going to have to keep an eye on that as I'm planting them. And then you just have to gently break them up. I know it seems a little bit scary pulling them apart like this, but honestly, they'll be fine. I've done this year in, year out. So you separate. The great thing with the leeks, it doesn't matter if you damage the roots, because guess what? And this is the bit that's going to scare you a bit. I trim the roots off. Now I don't go right up to it. I trim the roots off a bit. So still a little bit of root left on it, so still a little bit of a tuft. The reason I do that is so when I drop it into the ground, it goes down to the bottom, because I want as much of that to go into the soil as I can, so I've got a nice big long white leek. And you can even trim the tops off. I'm actually not sure whether it makes that much difference if you trim the tops off. Some people always trim the tops off. Then all you've got to do is just drop it down. The only thing you've got to make sure is that you can actually see some of the leaf. Okay? So you don't sink them down so you can't see the leaf, because obviously that would bury them. I know that sounds really obvious, but just in case anyone's in any doubt, and just drop it down. There we go, like that. Let's do a couple more. Generally when I do these, I pick out the bigger ones. So what I'm doing is I'm picking out the better ones, because I want to get all the good ones in, because I want to get as many rows in as possible. So I suppose a bit like when you transplant seeds, really. You want to get as many of the good ones in as you possibly can. My son loves leeks. He'd eat them every day. In fact, he's 14 and he'd probably be embarrassed if I said this, but we were buying some vegetables the other day and I wasn't going to get leeks and I was going to get a different vegetable. And he said to me, "Mummy, I can't believe you're not buying me leeks. Why would you not buy me leeks?" Now, how many 14-year-olds would get that excited about leeks? Now, I've got a few in the ground now. The other really important thing to do is you don't backfill them. Now, I know that sounds really, really odd. You think, oh God, they're going to die. You don't backfill them because you want that nice big dibber shape for the leek to fill out in. So you want the soil nice and loose. Now, what will happen is as it rains, they will backfill themselves, but you don't backfill them at this stage. I'm going to decide, if you don't think it's going to rain, you do need to water them in though. That's really important, and I might actually give them a little bit of a water before I leave, just to be on the safe side. So you do water them, but you don't backfill them. Now I'm just going to finish putting these in and I'll show you the final results. So all the leeks are in, as you can see. I've planted them all, so they're all sunk down nicely. And that's all that's left to do now is just to give them a little bit of water. So you just put a little bit of water direct into the hole. Now, it's been really, really wet here, and it's probably going to rain today, but experience tells me when I do something like this and think, oh, it's definitely going to rain, I won't water it, it won't rain. So even if you just give them a little bit, because what you're just trying to do is you're just trying to root them in so they start to grow. So I'll finish watering those later. What might be worth doing, sometimes it's worth netting them until they root in as well, because sometimes the birds pull them out, or the squirrels, or let's be honest, we're never quite sure what. If you don't cover them over, just check that nothing pulls them out, because you might have to dibber some of them back in again. If I remember rightly, something had a major party on my allotment last time I planted my leeks, so I think I'm going to put a little bit of netting down, and then once they've rooted in, you can just take them off and it will be fine. I do hope you've enjoyed watching my video on what to sow and plant in July, and I'd love to know what you're sowing and planting in July, and how everything's doing.